My name is Clara Bennett. I am 37 years old and I used to believe in karma. That justice would always find its way through the cracks of pain like ivy breaking concrete. I grew up in Portside, the daughter of a lobsterman, and a schoolteacher, the kind of town where the sea sings through your bones from birth. My father taught me how to fix engines, the thrum of boats and machinery became my heartbeat. After college, I landed a role as a manufacturing engineer at Bluefin Fish Co., the company that dried, salted, and sealed the ocean's bounty into neat silver pouches. For 5 years, I thrived there on 16-hour shifts, second-shift coffee breath, and the glow of fluorescent overhead lights that mistook me for one of their own. I was meticulous, methodical, relentless. When the process engineer bolted suddenly in 2015, they handed me his badge and told me to rebuild the packaging lines alone. I said yes. I said yes because I thought I could earn the corner office, because I thought if I filled every vacuum they handed me, maybe someday they'd hand me a seat at the table. Douchehead manager. That's not his name, but it's how he got etched into my brain. He was all golden boy ambition and sour mince sharp when you came too close, tried too hard. From the day he transferred into our department, I felt his eyes narrow when I spoke. I'd sketch a design in my notebook and he'd scoff, "Too complicated, Clara. We're in manufacturing, not NASA." Later in staff meetings, he'd recite my ideas with different words, his voice mellow, smooth like syrup poured over broken glass. Then he'd wink at me and say, "You're getting better at thinking like a leader." My coworkers saw it too. My best friend Naoko from procurement brought me chamomile lattes every afternoon and said, "You're his favorite target. He's threatened by you." But I laughed her off, kept wrenching. I told myself he was petty, but the numbers, his lies couldn't beat persistence. That was before the storm. Before the morning, I tightened my jacket against a cold drizzle and walked into an empty, fishy warehouse at 5 a.m. ready to dissect a broken vacuum sealer and found the silence eating me alive. My colleagues were ghosts that day. HR called one name then another until the floor buzzed with the sound of box suspense and whispered goodbyes. When I heard my own name, Clara Bennett, my stomach slithered like flipperless bait. I clutched my tools, walked into that beige-faced room, and they answered the question I should have been too numb to ask: position elimination. 5 years of weekend shifts, hospital-grade monster addiction, and guttural efficiency meant nothing. 4 months severance was their cut and run. Later, we found out the conglomerate holding us up chuckled all the way to the vat. Sell the company. Let them bleed profits. Fire the young women in their 30s, the quiet ones. The 90% layoff of women. Not a coincidence. HR wouldn't meet my eyes. Douchehead manager vanished to his golf course that morning, leaving his vice captain to hand me a cardboard box, rigid and impersonal like a coffin lid. My birthstone necklace had been a gift from my mother, and when he snatched the delivery, I missed my own funeral on December 2nd. Missed the way I watched Naoko's mascara slide down her face so far that her cheeks looked like windows streaked during a downfeed of rain. Missed the way her box clinked like the bones it was. I didn't drink on any given Tuesday before 8 a.m., but I did that night. There was cheap birthday cake and canned cider around Naoko's living room as we tried to ache through the white noise. We toasted in silence, cried in bursts, and spent 2 a.m. whispering injustices like prayers to no one. "He your manager." "Traitorous little snake," Naoko said, her voice serrated. We'd all seen him slide forward in meetings, tower smile across the table, and claim a QC analyst's numbers as his own. He'd whispered to the HR lead, "Clara's burnt out with no white knight, she'll never go legal." He had underestimated me. I wouldn't be burnt out. I'd be scorched. But snowballing into justice is hard when you're barred from 2 decades in manufacturing. Shortlisted for roles I'd killed myself over. My references drying up like old fish. While I sent links to my designs, the manager coasted through LinkedIn, self-Instagrammed on boats, posing like a hero in old-puddled boots. I started hunting him, dug into his wife's makeup palette share on Facebook, and traced him through departmental alumni until someone said, "He's out supporting his sister now. She's starting a logistics company." Special touch, the venom of the news, a familial legacy for the man who dumpster-dived mine. I applied at his sister's startup, without a second thought, just to sabotage him covertly, but never replied. Maybe he had already shadow banned me. Maybe vengeance liked frail optics before it struck. By month 3, I was hollowing or caramelized steak at the 24-hour diner on 4th Street, while scrolling job posts, with 2 Monster cans sweating in my cup holders. The marriage of fish hooks, blood, and bureaucracy that was Portside's economy had left me not wanting but desperate. When I finally got an offer from Farshore Pet Foods 6 hours away, I said yes more for spite than necessity. Generation like mine, they leave places, compiling anger and confusion more efficiently than algorithms. 6 months passed like a teeth-grinding exercise. At Farshore the work was softer, and the air didn't sting of brine, but my hands remained grease-smudged. I'd built a team that revered me in ways I felt uneasy accepting. That classic coffee creamer question, do they see your brilliance or your scars? But scars learned to crackle. Then came the morning my plant director stood at my cubicle slipping a paper onto my hastily cooked desk. My shoulders tensed. Clara, do you know this guy? He asked it like he could dissect truth with kindness. His name alone curdled my liver. Peter Harrington, plant manager candidate. 5 years at another plant. Same holes in his history. Same denter realities. You worked with him, right? At Bluefin, ponting his eyes while he said it, then snapping down to the root of my name like he'd expected my grief to still be sucking air. Clara, I smiled. Teeth brushed sweat and poison. He was an all-right person, but he made regular visits to drive the company bus. The lie was velvet-fingered, camouflaged in warmth. I told it because they're fools for metaphor but smart about signifiers in corporate hallways. The director splayed the resume on his knees like parchment, then began parking the paper into curls. When he finally scattered the remnants into the trash, I let myself drift. Fog floated through my fingertips, touching those particles. They were feathers in the eddy of a gull-infested sky. Only then it hit me that he'd already been caught once, screwed over the very day I left Bluefin. Even in disgrace, he hadn't changed. So when the director smiled and said, "You're right, we won't be following up," I left his office smiling but hollowed like crates after their fillets. I thought I needed closure, a physical bookend. But out there in the break room, I found the screaming gap that wasn't mending but growing, and I wouldn't only need to crush him into dust. I'd need to make sure he remembered every poison mess he'd spilled before they buried him in it. His wife was using some Mediterranean product line for skin care. His kids danced in summer carnivals. My rage had just one toe in the water, and the sea swirled deeper than I'd reckoned for. The lie dropped into their trash can like a gutted fish, but my victory was brittle, right away hollow as flotsam. 3 mornings later, the HR director's call drizzled ice water down my spine. So sorry, the candidate's family pulled a reference. What the hell did I do? I'd made that name sour again, his resume shredded in the name of my mother's memory, and now I was churning through the ceilings of my coworkers' eyes, searching for cracks. I found them everywhere. Whispers in the break room would buzz until the plant director knocked my shoulder once on his way to QA. His crudely rehearsed comments were edged like a blade we hadn't yet called it. I smiled. Practiced my homicide. That week alone, I crafted 6 fake LinkedIn profiles to ghost into the sister's company as temp staff, as maintenance, as data janitors, but the gates swung tighter. They knew me a block under every alias. Smells of seawater bled into my fingertips across the keyboards, and Peter began writing back into my inbox with embedded tracking links that looped through firewalls like piranha poetry. He hadn't disappeared. He'd just learned to swallow shadows. My hands shook coming off the midnight shift when I saw the first thread on company forums. Someone had surfaced my old Bluefin invoices. Notice how often her numbers erased after big audits. Snippets of my past contracts flickered in scraps, proof in fractured glass arithmetic, so cold even douchehead manager's ghost named it clinical. They were reconstructing me, dismantling my resume with his crumbs. I laughed once, bitter over leftover salmon chowder at my kitchen table, then screamed into the hollow socket of a bent fork. Nayako called halfway through the storm of my tantrum. Her voice stammered over a juddering line, "Clara, there's a lawsuit brewing. Former employees are aligning." I told her nothing, said I couldn't talk for free because even spiders get train fare discounts. She breathed, "I know you're still near." Paused. The line hissed 9 minutes later. She's never called again. My new strategy was candlelit sampling soil from the sisters' distribution hubs, overnight dumpster plunder transmissions polished craned. Sheer investors crushed here too. Same conglomerate looping through TAX Chinese letter passes, and shell companies, each crayon scraped down to its waxy skeleton. Peter would never materialize, but when his sister's warehouse bit into bankruptcy, ruin, she smiled back. I'd rerouted 3 shipments slick with diagonal HR blueprints, diverted GPS for company vans, to trail tax inspectors and their spouses. When the backlash raged as high as panic email, I found one responsible human whispering me on GitHub. Evelyn, a QA analyst from the dented hull of my old fish factory, with a blood question everyone left stalling. "We need you back," she messaged, squinting facts that survival has no active voice. Back meant morning ruination twice. Back meant Naoko's husk, dissolved with layoffs, me uttering exit chipper with machine part stories, while Douchehead's sister booted him securely into her new perch. Gut wounds answered deeper now. The fabric of my fishnet heart-worn thin tens snagging higher stakes, forgetting none of this was about fish. That's when my cousin Mia found me. Her arms shook like my father's right hand before he dropped his repeater into the surf. He choked ashore, says whales turn choosy since the training tanks drained them. She handed me scrawled print from a shared advise group, Peter's investing in shark cage cold storage. I spilled coffee along the wheel cover printing. The warehouse had smelled pondrot and pheromone abortion formula, it troubled with documented human. She whispered charters enjoined her company Wendy's because losing employees to haunting isn't marketable. Mia tethered me onto a foot taxi through Cleveland, swallowing 3 alive lobstermen with severe dust prodigies. That's where I first saw the patterns. The conglomerate's tax code chained like pilings in Louisiana's marshes, tabbed under seafood exports, but cooking Florida's HVAC contracts. My eyes learned the angles of guilt. Evelyn tracked my bluefin breach on NPM repo, while Peter locked his sister's mediocrity into upper ace logistics as VP. The numbers stacked in reverse anatomy. They'd been liquidating women engineers while asserting sexual harassment sweeps to quell EEOC touches. Portside's divinity hadn't been my arrogance but systematic rituals, stung by bloodwork and latchkeys. Mia kept us offside crisis census navigation products, while his sister styled herself the ice trout of supply chain tech flooding thrice intensives of Boston and Philly, but the audits I buried fizzed back through sociable microblog Hebrew Dalate Hebrew Yod Hebrew Gimel. This time the themes folded darker. I turned from assassin to journalist. Gathered all my old QC spreadsheets, strung sobriety into a coherent reflection. My father used to say engines flame eventually, Clara. Lessons are the only lint-free gear. When I boxed my childhood into oblivion, I'd lost the necklace. Or didn't I forget it under an infected apology, that January pre-bluefin implosion, the coworker's covered mouth, Ms. Bennett. Your dad drowned yesterday. The others don't know him, left that knifed memo in his blount code. She served me the truth iced with fingerfox timing. The anchors in Peter's story snapped upward. But he'd hopped on Pollard training this time looking to fish. Clerks his old plastic surgery habits screenplane disrupted even microblogging chatters. So by March I'd been boxed from Portside's WWAW chapter. By May the sisters' therm-integrated shipping system cheated Coast Guard intakes and MMS drowsingly expired. Nothing surfaced. Then Evelyn sent through NPM crypto containers. Our patient retaliation rooted hydro under the interfederate corpses. Do you remember the bluefin that externalized us? She'd written like history ketchup on the soul. I'd recall the day the casualty spilled hollow plastic sealers onto our wooden floor. Sent Peter, the replacement changed our OSHA WTF pages like he owned the consulting firm. The job hunt at Wendy's stung whitefish shy. Peter still chewed slack. The revenge needed restructuring. Fists punched digital paper lightly. I delivered my confession through 2 whistleblowers to a tech journalist. We'd shared past deals under seafood certs, retranscribed douchehead spreadsheets into multi-tiered hourglass charts tracing body parts freed via his layoffs. Evelyn allocated credit injuries, as if socialism could resend butter. Every time the sister dismissed a new security protocol, I recreated their files offsite like a crab's leg under a bench. And when Peter reacted dispatching his rentagoon Maxwell to ransack my sublet, the broadband feed told me 16 minutes before the break-in. Captured rental. Warrant locality. My father's old continua finally hummed into resonance. This wasn't a vendetta, it was relays. Cumulative pressure zones stacked memorable their architecture. The sea rewarded louder appetites than rage if you knew its lenders. Turnaround seeped in slowly. At dawn, I left Farsher's bus parking lot before a smoke detector smothered my ghost-like testing. Sat in a ray visualization lab, Mia found trolls shoving surrogate rage onto slackerators where old machine head skid the pavement of invisible protocols. I scrolled Peter's LinkedIn smiles, fresh-mowed my lungs until a child's sketch flopped from Wendy's press kit. The cartoon tilted vibrantly, some fish tank blacked out through a glass funnel. The caption screamed different, but the drawing was mine. Older. Neon, first generation. They'd smuggled it from my box art studio I hadn't logged into in a decade. The sisters' onboarding materials learned extraction by heart. They were grabbing at ghosts. Like mine. That night I peeled back the floorboards of Portside's municipal logs, finding a convoluted tax write-off lined with my old downstairs neighbor's name. She supplied video footage. Everyone buried. Scrape up skeleton joint. Evelyn lit up my inbox. The press is sniffing, she wrote, my international breach newer code less poisoned. The journalist had our dockets backrolled through Boston's dockside by now. By dawn, I'd coded an internal whistleblower interface for Wendy's slower boom dispatcher to siphon. Each day I fed in smaller truths, whole but actionable. Let them fold not upon their own crumbs, but in greater conglomerate conjugation. Then the sisters' offshore volumes capized, my exploits on TBMs tracking the fillet. The reporter hit publish 2 marker thrusters below campus earned consensus numbers were italicized by now. But by then douchehead's name had sunk safely. Peter Harrington, some lamefish president sucking donuts in Cairo. My revenge evaporated into Twitter spinach safe unanchored. Putting UN on trial takes insulation. So when the governor's office chuckled about prosecuting Wendy's logistics as Portside's eco-sausage, I filleted their love triangles. Created a security folder, leaking his previous address, his hidden family, his BENT Chinese letter charts that would haunt Boston's immigrant compliance standards. Evelyn found him next not in Cairo, but in Calgary's corporate brace political charisma since midday meal poaching. Doucheheader had ossiflated into a fisheries think tank. Now he threatened codstreams into Canada's crustless educators. Icefish symposiums with fellow grants and repression fabrics. When Wendy's pulled the plug on operations, small gulls piped through their empty high-rises like cash emits. Evelyn texted me external hard when relations stopped making sense. Internal logic breeds guilt. Passage. Act 4. The breaking honestly wasn't the cold storage scandal or the certification sabotage, it was reduced to watching my father's body enter photos on desktops, not concurrently. Mia pulled faces lit retinally at the DNA results. He wasn't meandered in icy brain matter congenial blood thinner spills industrial husk. He'd made choices up until the GAS Chinese letter. Had scribbled down our company's solvency docs on the back of a cornstarch bag, handed them to regional firm waiting for Bluefin's bullet. His disintegration wasn't collapse, it was order. That confrontation made me flood Wendy's old system with a map of douchehead's residence, corned through McCallum's shed somewhere iron during the winter. I'd ceased memorial flush duties, began glorializing nothing. Lead article crashed through Calgary's Policy Digest with corporate elders lined on fire sites deeper neurologically than Ellis's courthouse custody appeal. I'd sculpted each annex online explaining workplace currency, chasing him vocabularily through offshore digests. When Evelyn crushed CPP, alongside the county testimonies, I heard Hope sandbag across murmurs. Jalissa from accounts sent blood titers recounting her percutaneous cyanide, but she depended a twist. The sisters' map didn't sketch ammonia circles alone. Crossfeed channels orbited financial powwows through Portside's ex-owners' backdoors, uptake czars rope-flossing latent-related aims. This wasn't just revenge for me. Douchehead was the mycelium spineplot for stew called American capitalism. I'd burnt through 6 burner phones, 3 malls referencing NY Quill dependencies since Calgary's report leveled. Finally, yes, a foothold. Grappled every garment that allowed midsummer's ergonomy audit. By April, employers, Hull had screamed toward write-down after inquiries dotted the bill. The backlash made management curls test their loyalty mortgages, ready to split your former hungers. I'd learned Repo's mentally hacking change through contract coding embroidery, not vendetta. The room inside my mother's words stirred Wambra, memoirized absolutism. She'd loathed the tide so much when Sachs washed ashore with her Jocelyn last summer she swear planned the closures properly. Still, she'd never blinked while vacating the slot left. Karma's gradual honey, her last text to me, but she'd been dead wrong. Karma was a splintered thali it scabbed over nothing. Only meticulous algorithm evolution could catch a weasel queening through her own stripes. I scheduled the first sit-down pre-interview with Farshore's old director late May night. He rattled Jalissa's crimes too fast. Showed me a dashboard tracking my digital photonic prints, all massaged second-feed syntax awake-inverted Florida's location tracking specs. Said, "You think you're tearing down a manager. You're reshaping multi-million-dollar proof pool. Either emancipate or vacate," his tongue broiling even his shadows. Met my team with blunt silence shifting slides into Bones' alternative, what lay buried beneath Wendy's tally. Nayako reappeared coordinated through Evelyn's secretariat with a jug of Bonio Glow serum and a glare that branded me civilian meat sacrificed. "Clara, we made it through Calgary's tail, but the tide's deeper." Her hand wrapped mine as soft as circuit lubricant. "We don't need to stew in their gasoline anymore." So Act 4 landed me back under Peter's Calgary office, but not as a stalking pigeon light. On a Thursday wintered same as Portside's collapse, I'd binded a legal network to Jira default, user-certified truth vendies all over his schedule 30 framing steals from my old crosswalk. We stole not vehicles but his legacy. Erased his keynote slot on marine sensorial privileges in late May stealing malpractice moment via sanatorium, allotting 3 lines of his career assurances, but within allotted thrust where people big enough to crush lobsters secretly chew their nets. Nayako's rig provided the leverage chlorinated but unbroken. Evelyn's scripts filmed the breach black smoke barometric. Now the Avenger factiony multiplied, but my engine double-tabbed with cleaner fluid now. Remembered my father's words, factual runners throttle machinery with repairs not spectacle. The press made Harrowson their new focal pyramid, but I'd long stopped scavenging their slurry. My team created a popular ancestry hit on his immigrant creditrolls, found child labor feedstocks in his first warehouse. Federally infilled, data melted his consultancy Johnsonomics. At this point persona destruction ceased regarding treats, but when they reran, the audit numbers Wendy's collapse scored on 2 states. By then I no longer wept at the coofs. I charted logistics relay formats for sustainable quality similars. Dad's final lunchbox sealed at home Pearce found washing curbstone nose in Cleveland when Douchehead disbanded sleeper teams nursing skimming charts in Wendy's backlog. The winked memo inside the box read, "Fixin' unfreeden. Free only the systems that measure your repairs, not the bodies underneath." Retconning my odyssey tighter, I finally skipped the victim cloak altogether. Became my own witness protector self-rounded. My haters across the dockside blog twigged my absence like vacuum meats, but I'd clerked myself into ethical casework monitoring contracts disfigured by male manager urchins since 2017. The sisters' counterpenalty went unprecedented filing forgery charges against Peter, But the doc Arabic Alif, Arabic Lam, Arabic Meme, Arabic Wow, Arabic Jim, Arabic Wow, Arabic Dal, Arabic Alif, Arabic Ta already swam vitally through immigration attorneys in Boston. The final vanguard strike would wait for Act 5. That's when Naoko secured another meeting. Through Jira, through Slack, whispered Peter's gonna Kepler launch his new package standard at CANEX in July. I sliced the irony. That's where my LinkedIn feed killed all their allowance charts and ratings. Timing circles again. I'd found the template for his lecture notes Hebrew Kuf Hebrew Vav Hebrew Pay, given by Wendy's curveball engineer 2 years prior, scribbled all along the margins. I recognized my font crooked tunes from my unfinished PhD. He'd plagiarized me again. Written 12 lines of my nutrient algorithms before shuffle broaching engineer for hire across wildlife series and food technationals. Naoko took my hatred and sterilized technology. Let's crash his keynote, said it's simple as ballistics. Evelyn supplemented workforce logistics surrogates on point. Jalisa offered redshift auditing. I never laid eyes on undercutting his passenger transports through Kenya. Peter expected me to come with knife mark wounds, but I'd apprenticed the scalpel. I'm done executing karma myself. Now we reshuffle entire futures with policy gloves and industry exegeses. But not yet, son. Not yet. There were 2 more tabs to see LE, a NUPONE Chinese letter Japanese letter for every lie I'd swallowed. 1 more tank to salt through the process laid down by my father's fingers steering mine. Campaign climax baiting, but that was tomorrow's fog. By the end of Act 4 the sea had rolled into celebration mode, but I wasn't swimming yet. I was building the pump, the one that drains the tank back through their river-bloated hypocrisy. My revenge had graduated, not extinguished. Now his sister's LinkedIn tumbled with lawsuit bait, and Portside's mayor publicly scraping his token managerial referral logits retroactively. But march on. And my mother's necklace never resurfaced until I knocked at sister's doorway for a 3rd time. The IT intern secretly mailing me whatever he'd collected from however close my hack resembled policy betterments. Now just one last CSV to leak. 1 more confirmation hearings to sack with footage dad's lunchbox produced. But July teases me like a coiled seiner telling me, Clara Bennett, the storm isn't culled yet. It's ripe. Still lurching through the wave sabrate waiting for the blade. Act 5. The keynote looms like a cod's grin. I arrived 2 hours early at CANEX draped in a borrowed suit from Jalisa, whose fingers still ache from the Kenya audit. Evelyn's software flickers in my pocket humming scraper code she taught me during Wyoming's meltdown. Naoko's voice desteeds through encrypted text. He's humming your nutrient algorithm in his slides. You're inside him like a phantom organ. I wedge into row 13 behind an analyst from Portland's now-defunct Bluefin branch. His slide deck blooms like a hospital gown. There he is, Peter Harrington, 52 and baby-eyed from his own propaganda. His mouth robs cadence from my equations. My father's voice drops through static into my earbuds. My front-engine failure was never calculus. It was silence. Take him apart in daylight. I press forward on the keynote that Evelyn embedded into Wendy's old servers, a time bomb tucked behind conveyor belt metrics. His screen stutters demonic. Letters unravel into Jalisa's redshift, reports photonic threads swelling his career in reverse. The room inhales. Peter's specterless mouth flaps legislation I reversed engineered from his sister's ammonia trails. The audience sees his profit margins stitched from my stolen charts, the nutritional breakdown of Bluefin forced into synthetic feedlot supplements during the final sprint before bankruptcy. 7 assassination details our backbone. Jalisa streams live from Kenya, the exact stretch of rail Peter falsified to underreport his cadmium deliveries. Corporate sharks usually eat the noise. Tonight every clickbait tax evasion serpents upward. I stand now, the longest exhale in my life. Project the swimmer before disbudding filter. Was your father's death a consequence of your altered bodily harm reports? His face scorches like a brine burn. He loses syllables. Evelyn's signal loops security footage from that sublet Maxwell ransacked. Peter's fingerprint school the dumpster fire. Questions erupt like seafoam. Marcus from HR will later tell the press she dreamed this scenario after seeing my undergrad thesis, how I'd turn monopolies into fractals. But the real blow lands slower. I toss Dad's lunchbox across the stage. Aluminum slams his lectern. He unseals it, a shrimp corporation's ledger from 1994 he'd neglected to destroy. My mother's name emerges in needlepoint ink receipts retrofinancing his first lobbyist days. Nyako films his vertebral collapse. The goons don't drag me out. My biography now stains every delegate's CPA app. His sister's offshore codes bloom allergenic across slides just as he attempts that liverish smile. They'll later blanch the event as a hallucination generated by Wendy's failing quantum AI. I know better. This is the sea reclaiming territory. Stay tied, brain. The next hours are a blur of denials and PDF seizures. He accuses me of ghost hunting in Corsa Drive while Jalus's blood titers map his securities breach onto Nairobi's rail system. The thing dies not in violence, but in arithmetic sealed equation. The final moments come quietly. He meets my eyes as his keynote implodes his mouth a vertical glycine strand. Goodbye, Daddy-o, I think. Bad soil always sprouts. Act 6. Evelyn becomes a footbridge, not a weapon. 3 months into the winter, after the implosion, she finds me charting kelp strains. Carbon imprints in D, E, N, M, Chinese letter, Thai letter re28, Thai letter re32, Thai letter re25. I've decompressed from vendetta bloat. Capsize elsewhere. Vancouver, a set of dormitories, my new sanctuary. Jackboats still flicker in every installed syslog, but they're not mine. My father's last ledger scripted a termination bonus to any egg farm my descendants might construct. It's enough to reboot a fresh boat. My mother's necklace absorbs seawater through clomel finally surfacing in my DNA report categorized under lost assets. The sister posts often about maritime feminism, now monetizing guilt at symposiums her husband's shell companies swim orphaned along the coast. I've stopped feeding the collapse. The lights remain off. Douchehead manager evaporates into corporate raft folk, somewhere 4 channels west of rehab. I email former victims ground truth coordinates for their credit rot amended, but efficiency remains the only poetry that corrodes his legacy. Nyako joins me in Vancouver pushing snow crab futures through decentralized ledgers, while Jalus's audit drifts down the Nile discounting Peter's exiled shipping permits. My father's words persist in sleep cycles, but I've replaced his machinery metaphors. Engines are precursors. Repairs are species. We trade reparations like lesser catch. By the first thaw, my team pivots into advocacy, retexting OSHA standards across processing plants unfortunately repugnant. I abandon vengeance the day Jalusa sends bluefin DNA samples from that last toxic spawning run. They're healthy, hormonally uncaged. Peter's plunder recycles into ecological systems. His posted net worth becomes irrelevant now that rivers hold his name like sewage. The necklace arrives serendipityless from Douchehead's final warehouse, sealed in a crate marked open only if truth demands filth. Inside a disc encrypts his final confession, how he'd falsified Dad's replacement parts the day after Thea's spill, that his death wasn't gasoline but salvage. Mercy. I'd spent years processing his elimination when he'd already faded back into fish. Put simply, karma's a ternary system. Evelyn texts January arrives and we're still MK Dyers. I reply what we've charted historically neuters our fury. The press forgets rapidly, but the coast remembers sonar rising through my latest NGO reports. My cousin's crab boats now utilize his discarded thermal patterns. The reversal loops infrastructural, not personal. Nyako brings whiskey to our data rig night 1. Says you never cleaned your own slate. I answer no clean breaks appetite. On demonstration morning, I release the terminal whistleblower file onto Peter's sister's contracted servers. The truth VALAS, not a vendetta but an exemplar. She overturns into civil law 9 weeks later, claiming trauma from unethical journalism. But we know the real charge. We learn to replicate respect through wreckage. That last keynote scar, the projection where my father's journal flooded his podium, becomes training material for future whistleblowers. They remove his name again. This time SOON Chinese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter. That GRAVEYARD Hangul ko Sunkia, Enus Hangul ko Enus Hangul ko Chiut Enus Hangul ko Enus isn't mine. The revenge acidified but dormant. Jalas's audit lands hard in Norway. My kelp charter thrives 204 miles east. When journalists ask if I've found peace, I splice Chinese letter my rig. Peace rhymes with sinsalary. They print glorified elegies about Wendy's downfall. I think less about blame now, more about Hangul. Commum enus Hangul ko enus, Chinese letter logistics cascading upward. Evelyn mails Dad's final document back annotated in hexadecimal, this time granting operational and unprosecuted status to his whistleblowers. His last line translates into binary reads, engines must drown before they learn propulsion. I exhale system clean along the Northern Voices summit. My speech isn't about him but the cerumen of oppression, how it affects audit cycles across crab fisheries. Peter Harrington's last location surfaces through residual rail manifests. Nova Scotia's unnamed reader. My cousin Mia Ship's boxed sketch claims to his address glowless but required. Forgive me, Dad, I construct. Forgiveness isn't buried in acts. It's the silence after the hash payoff. The necklace stays around my mother's coffin. I keep nothing orbital, not even vengeance. When the journalist later defends my actions as dosage correction, I'm calmer than child who outgrows fear of whale skeletons. The sister's new consultancy thrives under rehabilitation headlines, her pity material donated to freshwater aquaculture. Cities fold, Wendy's collapse into climate dystopian crates. I pivot toward coastal justice rebuilding after the fillets churn into compost. Nayako texts during Alberta's thaw, the password wasn't your heart anymore. I print that into ISO frame overlooking kelp seasons. My internship with her now involves renewable verification codes across crashed fisheries. Evelyn turns witness in Switzerland's seafood tribunal, where T-A-X Chinese letter finally to uppercase. Deconstructing Peter's cadmium empire becomes her Ko Hienhe Enus. They'll later drug charge him for immigration puppeteering through EXOSKELET. Chinese letter, none of it matters to me. I've cut the tendon that thrived on proximity. The warehouse in Boston now hosts policy hackers who fillet debt structures into plankton. All audits terminate eventually. Even mine. They build museums around seafood collapses, but I abstain from plaques. My father's suicide wasn't weakness, it was calculation. Engines drown so others learn propulsion. UNEVER Chinese letter through spasm. You act through iterations. I'll admit tears when, during the final settlement where Wendy's execs apologize amortized backwards. I didn't cry for the payout, but how easy they became my puppets once I stopped needing them to apologize. The sea always multiplies whatever you submerge. My revenge dissolved and ruinized its mannerisms. Evelyn builds a fellowship named after Jalas's redshift audits. They'll trace food chain inequity through Peter's old kidney roots. I coordinate non-toxic algae transitions while Nayako pioneers pressure mapping ports in Panama. The necklace stays buried but better. I won't reflexively measure grief in quarterly rewards. By next spring, the revenge becomes sediment unreadable but fertile. I draft training modules for whistles equals HV Chinese letter Hangul, Kadi Hud, Inus, Hangul Ka Wei, Inus. No vendetta survives unrequited conversion through Hebrew Kuf Hebrew Vav. The final click of this revenge snaps silently, not a claim but rounding error. My father's note inside the lunchbox merges imprinting ethics across icy firmware. He wasn't rescinding. He was proxying computational empathy. When Jalasa receives Denmark's whistleblower medal, I realize the sea merely redistributes heat. Letting him evaporate enriched my coastline of options. Vengeance consumes implies a stomach. But what he became inside my internal architecture was infrastructure. My team transitions to marine governance by the time I plant nitrogen scavengers along Rust Belt reservoirs. Jobs sublet through Ingenuity platforms. Evelyn lives in Oslo erecting NGO with Jalas's audit DNA pluralized. The girl who once carved hatred into gap-line numbers has salted the tanks she once slept beneath. No longer CLARA BNNETT vendetta, N A MYCOLIUM BNNETT regenerative. The storm's end smells not of gasoline but regrowth aquifer. When they tear down PORTSIDES Chinese letter Hangul, Comium inus Hangul, Kou inus Hangulcon, nus, Thai letter E 42 Thai letter E 23 Thai letter E 07 Thai letter E 07 Thai letter E 32 Thai letter E 19, we replant crab rings along the pier pilings. The family wrench left from my father's repeater plugs into my packet tracer. His final tool wasn't collapse, it was realignment. Numbers now propagate through my new systems with unburnt clarity. I've transited from agent of underneath to architect of upstream. So Peteral Regulate Gurmukhi, Paera Dolavam, Inus, Bidet Engineering in Mumbai. His saltwater psychiatricity slides through trial courts continuously. I've stopped filing his UAIR EWISE. I construct open-source heat maps, instead documenting COASTLINE Hangul, Ko'enus, how bluefin migrate despite stolen algorithms. The sea remembers his theft but benefits beyond it. Whistleblowers graduate into biological queries. I dip my fingers into Vancouver night kelp, while Jalisa grids carbon Arabic fat, Arabic yet, Arabic halif, Arabic lamb, Arabic sheen, Arabic wow, Arabic fat, Arabic halif, Arabic noon crate. XLSX. Evelyn listens to OUR Arabic tat, Arabic wow, Arabic rot, Chinese letter narratives, unloading them below sea level so they gain. No apologies needed. No bouquet for haunters wronged. Only Koyena, Inus blueprint reprieved through microscopic Kohueba, Inus nodes. The revenge finessed through policy dorsals became transformative architecture. My father said not revenge whale oil but algae futures. Engines drown command plus shift plus Q undo wake me. I'm no longer the sink but conduit. Even USB ports decompose better than vendetta. Some stories end in seawater's alkaline.